According to U.S. political media Politico, 5 states, Indiana, Florida, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas, have started instructing state fund managers to divest from China over the past year. This move stems from concerns about potential conflict in the Indo-Pacific region and the risk of U.S. assets being frozen. The U.S. federal Thrift Savings Plan, the main federal pension fund, announced in November 2023 that it would stop investing in stocks listed in Hong Kong and China due to ongoing U.S. China tensions and increasing uncertainties. Global Times reported that U.S. states have begun halting public pension fund investments in Chinese enterprises, citing national security risks. According to the nonprofit Future Union, funded and led by venture capitalist Andrew King, state pension funds currently have 1 to 5% of their investments in China. Between 2021 and 2023, U.S. pension funds invested $68 billion in China. King believes this divestment is not just a quick trend, but other states are likely to follow suit, particularly Missouri, where the state treasurer views this measure as a defensive action. An analysis by Future Union indicates that over 4/5 of U.S. states have at least one public pension fund invested in mainland China and Hong Kong. Florida legislators' analysis shows that as of May 2024, the state still has about $277 million invested in Chinese entities, including banks, energy companies, and alcohol companies. Politico reported that although most of the states divesting from China are Republican, this trend is not limited to a single party. It reflects a broad consensus that Americans' views on Communist China are worsening. A Pew Research Center survey last year showed that 83% of Americans hold a negative view of Communist China, and 4 out of 10 Americans described Communist China as an enemy of the United States. This is the highest proportion since the think tank began asking this question in 2021. The think tank stated that limiting the influence of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, should be the top priority of U.S. government foreign policy. Nikkei Asia reported that from 2012 to 2016, only 24 pieces of negative legislation targeting Communist China were passed by the 50 U.S. states. However, between 2017 and 2022, this number surged to 128, indicating a deeper understanding of Communist China. Missouri State Representative Cody Smith stated, "In China, the line between public and private is much more blurry than it is in America. So I don't think we can fully know that if we are investing in Chinese companies, that we are also aiding an enemy of the United States. It's shameful to use American investments to harm Americans. Many states that once trusted China and naively assisted in its rise to power are now witnessing a growing negative sentiment among Americans toward China. As a result, they are pulling their pension funds out of Chinese investments. The investment risks are based on the following major considerations. 1. Concern over possible military invasion of Taiwan by the CCP increases. Some states are worried about potential asset freezes. Retired Admiral Phil Davidson, former commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, predicted in 2021 that Beijing could potentially invade Taiwan by 2027. Later that year, Taiwan's defense minister also warned that China would have the capability to launch an attack on Taiwan by 2025. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt worries that if CCP leader Xi Jinping orders a military invasion of Taiwan or otherwise stirs up conflict in the Indo-Pacific region, the state's investments in China could be harmed. He stated, "President Xi is looking at Taiwan and wants to have a united China at some point. I'm just trying to protect my state. If something does come up in the Indo-Pacific, I want to know what the exposure is to our pension plans." Kansas State Representative Nick Hoheiso noted that, since Russia blocked Kansas from liquidating assets held in Russia before the Russia-Ukraine war, they consider these assets sunk and have started discussions on whether the same thing could happen if China takes aggressive action against Taiwan. Thus, they push forward with divestment legislation. In August 2022, following then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, tensions in the Taiwan Strait escalated dramatically. The Pennsylvania State Treasury subsequently withdrew $394 million of investments from China. 2. China uses stolen intellectual property from American companies to produce similar products, thereby securing subsidies from the Chinese government. According to venture capitalist Andrew King, quote, "Frankly, there should be shame, more shame than there is, for continuing to have those investments at this point in time," unquote. He believes that China uses stolen intellectual property from American companies to produce similar products, thus obtaining subsidies to lower market prices. Senior advisor and trustee chair in Chinese Business and Economics, Scott Kennedy, pointed out that in China, if you succeed in stealing foreign intellectual property, you get government subsidies, making it even more attractive to U.S. investors. Kennedy added that Chinese companies have stolen intellectual property needed to develop advanced semiconductors. While these semiconductor products are now banned from being sold to China, there are no restrictions preventing Americans from funding Chinese companies to manufacture the products with stolen technology within China. The situation is truly alarming. In June 2023, U.S. semiconductor equipment giant Applied Materials sued a Chinese-backed competitor, Matson, for poaching talent and transferring semiconductor equipment design secrets over 14 months. The lawsuit outlined suspicious behaviors of key departing employees. These include clearing their company-issued phones, refusing to disclose their new employers, lying in some cases, and updating their LinkedIn profiles with false job information. Applied Materials stated that a departing executive tried to cover its actions using benign email subjects like tax, attention, length, and header, and lied on 3 occasions during exit interviews. 3. Selling U.S. land to Chinese entities poses a national security risk. According to the National Agricultural Law Center, more than half of the 50 states have already passed or are considering similar laws to restrict foreign land ownership. Indiana legislators expressed concerns about CCP espionage activities on U.S. soil, posing a national security risk. In her January 2024 state address, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds stated, quote, "As China's threat adapts, our laws should too, because we cannot let foreign governments undermine the agricultural dominance our farmers have worked so hard to build," unquote. She mentioned selling farmland to Chinese military-industrial enterprises to set up bases. Florida and Texas enacted some of the most confrontational legislation in the past year. In May 2023, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a law to comprehensively restrict Chinese citizens from purchasing houses or large tracts of land in the state on national security grounds. In July 2023, the U.S. Senate voted to ban Chinese entities from buying U.S. farmland. Montana Democratic Senator and co-drafter of the bill, John Tester, stated during a Senate speech, quote, "This is a critical step toward making sure we aren't handing over valuable American assets to foreign entities who want to replace us as the world's leading military and economic power," unquote. At the federal level, in July 2024, the Treasury Department proposed expanding the powers of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States to include reviewing real estate purchases near military bases. Most notably, in May 2024, President Biden stopped a Chinese-backed cryptocurrency mining company from owning land near a nuclear missile base in Wyoming. He called it a national security risk to the United States. This order forced the company to sell the real estate they were using for cryptocurrency mining near Francis E. Warren Air Force Base. It also required the removal of certain equipment owned by Mine One Partners Limited, a company partly owned by the Chinese government. 4. The state university's employment of Chinese students as researchers raises concerns about potential Chinese espionage issues. In the spring of 2023, the U.S. implemented measures to restrict public universities and colleges from accepting funding from individuals or institutions or participating in collaborations or agreements with 7 countries: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and Syria. Notably, China is the largest source of international students at the University of Florida, a major research institution, particularly in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This bill is part of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' efforts to counter Chinese and other countries' interventions in Florida campuses and intellectual property theft. Supporters argue that Florida scientists have failed to clarify their relationships with China and explain how public funds are used in China. They also called for heightened vigilance from state universities. Florida's chief financial officer, Jimmy Patronis, stated that taxpayers and state legislators do not want to, quote, invest into a country that's not being totally transparent or hasn't the best interests of Floridians at heart, unquote. 5. China engages in black market trade of chemical agents used to manufacture fentanyl, harming Americans. The Drug Enforcement Administration seized a record 386 million doses of lethal fentanyl in 2023, which is enough to kill all Americans. Nearly 10% of these drugs, totaling 37 million doses, were seized in New York alone. These drugs, disguised as pills or powdered substances, contain hidden lethal doses of fentanyl. A shocking video circulated online shows scenes at San Francisco, California, a cultural and financial hub on the U.S. West Coast, now facing the worst social-economic problems in its history. Many property owners and businesses in San Francisco report that their neighborhood are on the brink of collapse. The city is filled with distressing scenes, especially over the past few years, which is truly heartbreaking. The video shows a group of zombie-like individuals gathering on American streets. Their bizarre behavior is frightening, and it turns out that their zombie-like actions are driven by an unstoppable addiction to a new drug, fentanyl. This extremely potent substance has caused the number of deaths from fentanyl abuse in the U.S. to quadruple over the past decade. The massive impact of this crisis has led to significant U.S. sanctions on Chinese companies and strained relations with Mexico, making it one of America's toughest public health crises. In a campaign ad, Missouri Governor Mike Parson emphasized that fentanyl from China is poisoning our children and stated that China is a threat, they won't get any money from us. Pennsylvania politician Doug Mastriano's motivation for proposing a divestment bill was the harm caused to Americans by the black market trade in fentanyl. He questioned, quote, how do we in good faith continue to invest in these companies when we know China is the source of almost all the fentanyl that has killed tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians, unquote. 6. China's cyber attacks on American infrastructure have caused social disruption in the U.S. and are being used as part of the CCP's extensive propaganda efforts. Missouri Treasurer Scott Fitzpatrick believes that Communist China poses a broad threat to U.S. national security, including cyber attacks on U.S. infrastructure. At the annual Munich Security Conference in 2024, FBI Director Christopher Wray stated that while the world is focused on the Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas conflict, the threat from China should not be overlooked. He said that due to the development of artificial intelligence, China's covert implantation of aggressive malware in U.S. critical infrastructure has reached unprecedented levels. Brandon Wales, executive director of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, said, quote, it is very clear that Chinese attempts to compromise critical infrastructure are in part to pre-position themselves to be able to disrupt or destroy that critical infrastructure in the event of a conflict, to either prevent the United States from being able to project power into Asia or to cause societal chaos inside the United States, to affect our decision-making around a crisis. That is a significant change from Chinese cyber activity from 7 to 10 years ago that was focused primarily on political and economic espionage, unquote. 7. ByteDance is suspected of potentially providing user data to the Chinese government, leading to concerns about personal information leaks. A former executive of ByteDance, the Chinese parent company of TikTok, accused the tech giant of having a, quote, culture of lawlessness, including stealing content from rival platforms Snapchat and Instagram in its early days. He also claimed the company is a useful, quote, propaganda tool for the CCP. These allegations are part of a wrongful termination lawsuit filed by Yu Yintao, who served as head of engineering for ByteDance U.S. operations from August 2017 to November 2018. The lawsuit, filed in a state court in San Francisco, states that Yu was fired for raising concerns about a worldwide scheme to profit by stealing intellectual property from other companies. The most startling claim in Yu's lawsuit is that ByteDance's Beijing office had a special party committee, sometimes just called a committee, responsible for monitoring the company's apps, quote, guiding the company on advancing core communist values, unquote, and even possessing the power to shut down the company's Chinese apps. As a result, 39 states across the U.S. implemented policies to restrict the use of ByteDance app TikTok, such as banning the app on state-level devices. Particularly, ByteDance is suspected of possibly providing user data to the Chinese government. Despite Beijing's denials, the platform remains restricted in some countries. Montana became the first U.S. state to fully ban TikTok. Starting in 2024, TikTok downloads will no longer be allowed there to, quote, prevent citizens from being monitored by the Chinese Communist Party. The actions of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, have significantly influenced global perceptions, resulting in a notable shift in international attitudes towards Beijing. In particular, various U.S. states have proposed restrictions on American pension funds to prevent China from infiltrating the United States. Former AFP China correspondent Pierre-Antoine Donnet's book, China, the Super Predator, was published in Chinese in Taiwan in July 2022. The book describes how Beijing authorities have become comprehensive predators through human rights abuses, environmental pollution, technology transfers, and influence operations, posing a global challenge. Donnet argues that the West has been too naive about China, the CCP, thinking that China would change or even democratize due to foreign influence since President Nixon's secret visit to China in 1971. He says China, with U.S. help, joined the World Trade Organization, but failed to deliver on promises of free trade and open markets, instead ended up betraying the world. The book says the U.S. was the first to wake up, realizing it was helping the CCP become its enemy. Other countries, including in Europe, are also gradually waking up. Donate notes that Beijing has tried to deceive Central and Eastern Europe for more than a decade, but has almost completely failed. Even Hungary, which is a pro-China country, faces domestic anti-communist forces. Germany, previously heavily reliant on the Chinese market, has shown a tougher stance under its new foreign minister since 2021. With the 2024 U.S. election approaching, regardless of whether the Democratic or Republican Party wins, these anti-CCP laws and policies are likely to continue, even without increased legislation.